Welcome to For the Record. I'm Elly Laliberte. Well, we're starting our show this week with a once again growing Democratic primary field for governor. After months of speculation, former Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes is running for governor. He announced his campaign last week and joined us earlier to talk about why he's getting into the race.
I decided to get in this race because we find ourselves in a very critical moment in this country and specifically here in Wisconsin. But Wisconsin has always been at the forefront of positive change across this entire country. Now, as costs continue to rise, as our family farmers, our small business owners, and working people in general continue to feel the pinch of these rising costs, the need for leadership could not be more apparent. And unfortunately, President Donald Trump has made things worse for working people in Wisconsin. And my experience as a lawmaker, my experience as Lieutenant Governor is ultimately what drove my decision to get in this race for governor. It is the leadership and the work that I've been a part of to improve quality of life for people in every corner of the state.
Now, we also discussed top issues. According to a Marquette Law School poll, 60% of respondents are very concerned about health insurance. In Wisconsin, roughly 300,000 people rely on health care tax credits to afford coverage through the ACA marketplace.
The leadership that I'm looking to bring to the governor's office to ensure a better quality of life, to ensure that we fully fund our schools, to make sure that we close the loopholes that allow the wealthiest in our society to get away without paying their fair share, and also ensure that we expand Badger Care on the very first day. That is a day one priority. I will call the legislature into special session. I will not sign a budget that does not include Badger Care expansion. Wisconsin is one of 9 states in this country that has yet to expand our Medicaid program under the Affordable Care Act. Republican-led states and Democratic-led states have all taken this expansion to ensure that they can cover as many people as possible.
And so you mentioned here, too, bringing a special session to get this Badger Care taken care of day one. You think you can get Republicans on board for that?
Well, look, this campaign is not just about me running for governor. This campaign is about me running for governor along with uniting this state to bring about a majority in the state Senate and the state Assembly. And regardless of what the legislature looks like, that special session will be called and we will debate Badger Care expansion immediately. And again, I refuse to sign a state budget that does not include Badger Care expansion.
Now, Barnes is carrying the weight of a failed run for U.S. Senate back in 2022. He lost to current Senator Ron Johnson just by 1 point, but now he says he's ready for a comeback campaign. I want to ask, too, after such a big race, what makes you think this time around will be different?
And I'll tell you, in 2018, we won by a little over half a point. So I've been on both sides of that coin. And I think often about the conversation I had with Barack Obama after my election, after the 22 election. And he talked about the race he lost for Congress. He talked about what he did after. He got back into organizing, and that's exactly what I did. I've been working with a group called Power to the Polls. We've been focused on engaging new and infrequent voters.
Well, how are you going to sway voters who maybe lost confidence in you after that race?
Well, look, I can tell you right now, we have, first I want to just acknowledge the volunteer base that made my race possible. It was the closest challenge to an incumbent in the entire country. It was the closest Senate race in Wisconsin in over 100 years. People wrote me off from the very beginning. People wrote me off in the primary in that race. We defied expectations, and I would not have been able to defy those expectations if it were not for the groundswell of support that I had going into it. And people are still on board and ready to see the change happen that we desperately need. Now, unfortunately, we have a president who's making life increasingly more difficult. But people see exactly what's going on. People know who has the track record of fighting for them. And people know the people who have been there in Washington, D.C., like Tom Tiffany, fighting for themselves, for their wealthy donors, and only doing the bidding of Donald Trump when he needs to be doing the bidding of the people of Wisconsin. That's who I'm fighting for.
And Republican Congressman and gubernatorial candidate Tom Tiffany had this to say about Barnes, quote, Mandela Barnes is a dangerous far-left extremist who wants to defund the police and cash bail and abolish federal law enforcement. I heard you chuckle a little bit there. What's your reaction to that?
Because Tom Tiffany's going to make up whatever because he does not have a plan for Wisconsin. If he had a plan for Wisconsin, he would have enacted it as a member of Congress. He would have worked alongside the president, who is a member of his party, to make things better for Wisconsin. But people know over this last year, these last 11 months, things have not gotten better. They've gotten worse. And it is because people choose to play politics instead of getting to work for Wisconsin. Now, I will say, I don't support whatever he's talking about. I don't support defunding the police. I want to make sure that our communities are safe. I want to make sure that law enforcement has the resources that they need. And I do have to pause here because the crime has impacted me personally. And I can't speak for anybody else. I know deeply the pain of losing somebody. I lost my first friend in high school to gun violence. This is something that too many people in our communities are dealing with. That is one of the main reasons I got involved in politics. It's one of the main reasons I stepped up and became an organizer. It's one of the main reasons why I ran for the state legislature and served because of this problem, this persistent issue of violence and crime in communities when it seemed like nobody was prepared to solve it.
We have the full unedited interview with Barnes up right now on channel3000.com. And this week, another Democrat jumped into that crowded primary. Joel Brennan announced this week he's running to succeed Governor Tony Evers. The 55-year-old worked as Wisconsin's Secretary of State Department of Administration from 2019 to 2022. He's currently the president of the Greater Milwaukee Committee. Brennan also spent 11 years as executive director of Milwaukee's Discovery World, the state's largest science museum. And 3 Department of Corrections staff members are on leave after the woman involved in the 2014 Slenderman stabbing left her group home last month. 23-year-old Morgan Geyser escaped a group home on Madison's southwest side after cutting off her ankle monitor. Madison police say they were not made aware of her escape for 10 hours. The Department of Corrections is now updating procedures when a monitor is damaged in an effort to decrease the time before law enforcement is notified. The DOC is also outlining how to consult with DHS for incidents that occur with clients that the DOC supervises. And the Wisconsin Elections Commission has denied a request from the Federal Department of Justice to turn over some voter information. Earlier this month, the U.S. DOJ demanded Wisconsin's voter registration list, including the last 4 digits of each voter's Social Security and/or driver's license numbers. In the letter to the DOJ, commissioners wrote, although the commission is willing to provide any non-confidential voter registration data, Wisconsin law explicitly prohibits the commission from providing the full, unredacted voter registration list. The letter to the DOJ was signed by all but 1 commissioner. A new law in Wisconsin increases penalties for people who commit sextortion. This week, Governor Tony Evers signed a bipartisan bill, now Wisconsin Act 48, into law. Known as Braden's Law, it's named after a 15-year-old Wausau area student who died by suicide after being targeted by an organized sextortion ring. The law expands the Wisconsin DOJ's crime victim compensation program to include death by suicide or attempted suicide among the acts that must be compensated. It also makes it a felony to engage in sextortion that results in a suicide.
I have hope that we will take back control from these criminals and our children will no longer be pawns in their sick games. The passing of Braden's Law to me is perseverance and proof that we will fight for our children until the day that we join them again.
Braden's Law also will include graduated penalties for offenses depending on the offender, the act, and the victim's age or actions. And next on For the Record, the Milwaukee judge accused of helping a man evade immigration enforcement agents is in court next week. We're breaking down what we could see in her trial when we come back. Tomorrow, the trial for the Milwaukee judge accused of helping a man evade immigration agents will begin. You'll remember back in April, Judge Hannah Dugan was arrested and indicted on federal charges. She's accused of obstruction and concealing an undocumented immigrant, Eduardo Flores Ruiz, who was later deported. Prosecutors expect to call up to 28 witnesses, including ICE and federal agents, and say it could take several days before the defense presents its case. Video from a courthouse hallway showing agents following Flores Ruiz and an interaction with Judge Dugan will be a key part of the trial. Dugan has pleaded not guilty. We sat down with UW law professor John Gross earlier this week to break down this case and talk about what this trial could look like. How common is it to see a criminal case against a judge like this?
This is an extremely rare case. When you do see criminal cases against judges, it is typically either for something that they did completely outside of the courthouse, right? A judge is pulled over and they're operating while intoxicated. Or you see cases brought against judges for some type of corruption because they were abusing their office, something like bribery. Again, those prosecutions are themselves extremely rare to see, but to actually charge a judge for something that they did in their own courthouse, outside of their courtroom, and partly while they were on the bench in their own courtroom. It is extremely rare to see a case like this.
And I want to talk to, because obviously a big part of this case is what power she had in operating her courtroom in the way she did. So I want to talk to a little bit about what legal powers judges have over their courtrooms.
Judges have inherent authority to manage and run their courtroom and handle the cases that have been assigned to them. And this is one of those areas where that judicial authority seems to be running up against the prosecution's claims that she did something that violated federal law.
I kind of want to walk people through what we expect this trial to look like.
So I think the trial will be interesting because I don't think you'll see a lot of factual disputes between the two sides. You're going to see probably a lot of testimony put on by the prosecution that involves the federal law enforcement agents that were involved in the case, as well as different court personnel who were in the building. I think you'll see a very thorough depiction of all of the events of that day. What will be in dispute, really, is whether Judge Dugan's conduct actually falls under these laws, these crimes that she's been charged with, and even more specifically, what was her intent in confronting the ICE agents? Was it for a corrupt purpose, or did she have a legitimate reason for confronting them in the hallway?
And I want to talk to you about what you think the arguments will look like on both the prosecution and the defense side of this case.
So I think the prosecution is going to push the idea that what she was doing was irregular, that this was not the way she normally ran her courtroom, that she did things that day that were not things that she did in the normal course of business. And they're going to argue that that demonstrates that she had the intent to aid this individual who they were attempting to arrest, that she was attempting to aid him in getting out of the courthouse without being arrested, running some type of interference on his behalf. I think the defense will counter by saying two things. One was that Judge Dugan was legitimately concerned about these types of arrests happening in the courthouse. They had already happened on several occasions, and there was an ongoing conversation between federal law enforcement and the chief judge about how these apprehensions should take place, if they're going to take place inside the courthouse. And so Judge Dugan's reaction to this occurring may have been based, from the defense perspective, in a legitimate concern about the safety of individuals who are inside the courthouse, about a potential chilling effect that these arrests could have on participation in court cases. And so the defense is going to, I think, argue very strongly that she did not have a corrupt intent. It was just the opposite. She was trying to make sure that what was happening was lawful, and that what was happening in that courthouse was safe and regulated. And the other thing I think that they will add to the mix is that when she was inside her courtroom, adjourning this case, handling this case that was in front of her on her docket, that she should be entitled to some level of immunity for the actions, the official actions she takes as a judge.
Now, that was a condensed version of our interview with John Gross. You can find our full unedited interview up right now on channel3000.com. And a Dane County judge is refusing to step aside on a felony forgery case of a former attorney for President Trump. Jim Trupus was a part of the fake elector scheme back in 2020, a plan to submit paperwork falsely claiming that Trump won Wisconsin in the presidential election that year. Trupus argued all Dane County judges were biased against him, citing his own work on the court 10 years ago. The Dane County judge wrote could adequately hear the case. And help for U.S. farmers is on the way from the White House in the form of a $12 billion aid package. Most of the aid will be directed to crop farmers through one-time payments under the Farmer Bridge Assistance Program. The remaining $1 billion will go to farmers whose crops fall outside of those covered by the program. The Agricultural Secretary said the money should begin flowing by the end of February, but Wisconsin's Farm Bureau says there's a lot that's still unclear.
We appreciate the announcements of new trade agreements, but we need to see them finalized. It's important that these deals move forward from headlines and be actually signed agreements, and that tariffs are eased so that normal trade can resume. Like I said, farmers don't want special treatment. We don't want aid. We just want a fair market to sell what we produce, and we believe when markets are fair, we can compete with anybody.
Wisconsin lawmakers are introducing a bipartisan bill meant to support organic farmers and producers. The Domestic Organic Investment Act, introduced by Senator Tammy Baldwin and Republican Congressman Derek Van Orden, would make a development grant program permanent. That program would help organic farmers fill the supply and demand gap. The proposed legislation would help farmers hire more workers, modernize their systems, expand processing capacity, and improve their ability to comply with regulatory requirements. Next on For the Record, new proposals passed by Madison's Common Council this week to address the housing shortage. Why one alder says he still has some concerns.
You're watching For the Record with host Elly Laliberte.
Well, people in Madison and Fitchburg are receiving higher property taxes. Last year, voters approved $507 million to renovate or replace 10 schools. Madison Schools said those buildings had critical HVAC and plumbing needs. The other asked for $100 million in operating expenses. The programs would be for 4K and early learning, multilingual education, middle school career exploration, and expanded extracurricular activities. Over 4 years, the average homeowner in Madison will pay $3,800. News 3 Now spoke with one homeowner who has to pay an additional $750 next year.
It's a blessing that I can still put food on the table. The $750 is not keeping me from that. So I'm grateful that I can still do that, and the kids at the schools can get what they need.
Finance staff with the district acknowledged that this is the highest year of the referendum tax hike for homeowners, but say the district's hands are tied.
Over the last 15 years, the legislature has backed away from the state's commitment to share in the cost of local public schools. The result of that is for every less dollar in state aids to operate a local school, you have to increase your property taxes, and you can only do that if the voters vote yes, like the voters in Madison did. So it's a broken school finance system.
And this week, the Madison Common Council passed a resolution to increase housing choices in the city. Two of those changes are allowing 3 to 4 unit buildings in the city's busiest areas for public transportation, as well as the ability to create cottage courts in most residential districts. That would allow for a collection of up to 8 homes that can all be on a single zoning lot, as long as they all surround a center courtyard or shared space.
People want housing choice. They want to be able to make a decision about housing that kind of meets their needs. And right now we've got a lot of market rate and a lot of higher priced home ownership options. This is hopefully to meet some of the missing middle housing that is so desperately needed.
And while the ordinance is passed, it wasn't without some concern. District 11 Alder Bill Tischler raised concerns about his ability to preserve a nationally recognized historic area within his district. That recognition allows constituents to receive tax credits to modify their properties to create income.
If you're going to build a 4-unit housing on an existing single-family lot, it's most likely going to result in tearing down the structure. And the concern is that in the long run, like I said, maybe not 10 years from now, maybe not 20 years, but eventually if we chip away too much at the historic district, we will lose the national designation.
In a statement, Madison Mayor Satya Rhodes Conway said in part, quote, "There is still work to be done to ensure every resident can find a home in Madison that works for their family." And the Madison Metro Transit System is facing a $6 million shortfall that will need to be covered by taxpayer dollars. That shortfall was partly caused because of operational costs, overestimations for how much revenue could be collected from fares, and salary and benefit increases for drivers. To address the shortfall, the city will use more than half of its 2025 budget surplus. For the Record, we'll be right back. And before you go, you could soon see some new license plates on the road. The Wisconsin Department of Transportation unveiling 2 new license plates designs this week. First is the new blackout plate, which features an all-black background with white letters, numbers, and outline. Then there's the yellow retro yellow plates, which call back to the 70s, featuring familiar black letters on a sharp yellow background.
The yellow plate is a nod to our state's celebrated history as America's dairyland and really connects us across the generations. And for years, we've seen the popularity of the blackout plates in many of our surrounding states. Offers a sleek and stylish design that vehicle owners have been asking for. And so these new plates are going to be great as well.
Both plates come with a one-time $15 insurance fee and a $25 annual registration fee. The income generated from the registration of the plates will help finance infrastructure improvement projects statewide. And that does it for us this week. A reminder, you can watch full episodes of the show as well as unedited interviews on our website at channel3000.com. Have a great rest of your weekend. For the record, I'm Elly Laliberte.
This has been For the Record.